So I want to show you guys how to do a French seam. You would use a French seam in this situation where this is the dress's sleeve that kind of puffs at the bottom, and it will not have any lining on it. So because it's kind of sheer and you can see underneath it, I don't want a raw edge for my seam on the inside to just be hanging out looking kind of funny inside there. So the way you do a French seam, if that's your situation and you want to make a little bit nicer seam on the inside, is you actually pin your seam wrong sides together, which is just so weird. It goes against everything you've ever been taught in sewing. So I'm going to go ahead and do that really quick. So I have my wrong sides pinned together on this seam. Now I made the pattern so that I have 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So for this first stitch, I'm going to be super close to the edge. I'm going to be stitching it at 1/8 of an inch. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Okay, so I have just sewn my seam at 1/8 of an inch with wrong sides together. Now what I'm going to do is come in here and just trim off as much as I feel comfortable, especially where the fabric is really thick. Like right here where I've got these flowers and a lot of the applique lace stuff going on. I'm going to like trim that off if I can. Normally, if I were going to be using a cotton or something, I would totally press this and I would kind of, you know, press this open, press this flat. But this lace stuff just doesn't really press very well. So I'm going to skip that step. So now you turn it so that you have wrong sides out. And you're going to roll this in between your fingers to try and open that. And you're going to pin it and make it as flat as you can get it. So now we're doing it with wrong sides together. Okay, so now I have pinned wrong sides together, and I've tried to fold that as best I can right on that seam line and get it as flat as I can with my fingers. This lace is a little tricky because it's so super lumpy. So now I'm going to take it back to my sewing machine, and this time instead of 1/8 of an inch, because my seam allowance is 3/8, I am now going to use about 1/4 of an inch. So we did the first seam 1/8 of an inch, and now I'm doing 1/4, so that equals my total of 3/8 of an inch. Okay, so I've just stitched the next seam, and if you look really closely, let me see if I can show you this very closely. If you look closely where I just stitched, I tried to stitch it so that it was on the outside of that, I guess the raw edges that are now tucked up inside there. And if you turn it so that it's right sides out now, you see how it's like perfectly encased in this little casing inside. Now sometimes if you don't trim your first seam allowance edges enough, sometimes they will poke through right here and you'll kind of see those threads sticking out. So that's why it's really important to go through and trim that. But this actually looks pretty good. So now you have a really nice seam that isn't going to be scratchy or annoying to the skin, to the person wearing it. And that's a French seam.